YouTube says it has had enough of vaccine misinformation on its site.
And false stories from phony sites to run circles around major news outlets.
Many people don't know the difference between something real and something created to deceive them.
Open your eyes.
If you've ever had this feeling that something was terribly wrong with the world that we live in, but you couldn't figure out just what it was, then you've come to the right place. Secret societies, mystery religions, and the Illuminati have been controlling our reality since the beginning of time. But not anymore, because there is an awakening happening, and you are about to become a part of it. Wake up, because this is a call for an uprising.
22 people have gone on trial in France on charges of murder and other serious crimes, centered on members of a Masonic lodge accused of running hit squads. Those in the dock include 4 military personnel from France's Foreign Intelligence Service, 2 police officers, a retired domestic intelligence officer, a security guard and 2 business executives. One victim, who survived 2 assassination attempts, explains the consequences of the attacks.
Trouble du stress post-traumatique dont je n'arrive pas à sortir en fait depuis 6 ans, ça revient par épisode. Cancer et puis exclusion de ma profession également. Voilà, ça fait quand même beaucoup de choses.
Most of the accused, aged between 30 and 73, have no previous criminal records. They are accused of murder, attempted murders, aggravated assault and criminal conspiracy, all on behalf of a mafia network inside the former Athener Masonic Lodge in a Paris suburb.
This is a call for an uprising. Welcome to today's show. You heard that correct. The Freemason Mafia network is on trial for murder in Europe. And of course, when we hear these stories and we see these trials, we have to obviously pay attention to what happens and what the narratives are, because it's very hard to believe that there would be a murder trial where they're openly calling Freemason a mafia network. And of course, if you know how this network actually works, you realize that, well, the police are obviously indoctrinated with Freemasonry, most of which are members of Freemasonic lodges. Doesn't mean every single person who's a police officer is, but nowadays, if you're applying to be a police officer, you most likely have to go through the fraternal order, of course, as we know, of Freemasonry. And you can bet your bottom dollar that the judge of any trial that is taking place, especially a murder trial, is very likely a member of a very high-ranking secret society. Now, it doesn't have to be directly related to Freemasonry, like Skull and Bones. There's many other sectors of these secret societies, but their teachings are all the same. They're all taught that Lucifer is the god of this world, and that is the one who they worship. So we can hear this story, we can say secrets are being revealed, but we have to pay attention to how this works, right? Because it's highly likely that these people end up walking, that the trial is dismissed, that there's not enough evidence, that it's discrimination against Freemasonry, because they've been building up this narrative about how Freemasons are victims, just like they do with the Synagogue of Satan, of course, that people target them. There's been stories of civilians targeting Freemasons and murders of Freemasons because of conspiracy theories that they've read online, which again ends up being the same as we know with the Synagogue of Satan and the people you can't speak about, even though their teachings talk about doing all sorts of acts with young children and all sorts of despicable things and how we're all cattle. Well, you can't ask questions about the books that they read in their temples, otherwise you're anti-Semitic, right? So they're building up this narrative with Freemasonry to protect Freemasonry, but the fact that this is even out there is something we need to pay attention to, because this should be waking people up. They should be hearing the term Freemason and Mafia because they're one in the same. And then you read the story and you see, well, 4 Freemasons, 4 officers from France's external intelligence agency, 3 police officers, 6 business executives and professionals, including a doctor and an engineer. And of course, they only say 4 Freemasons along with those other fellows, but you can guarantee that all of those people are also Freemasons as well. You're talking about intel agencies where you have to go through secret societies to be a member of government intel agencies. police officers, like I had mentioned, businessmen. If you think guys like who are CEOs of corporations like Pepsi, etc., aren't members, think again. They didn't just go to college and receive a degree and become a CEO of Pepsi. And of course, we know these corporations like Pepsi, which put fetal cells inside of their products. Okay, we know how absolutely corrupt all these corporations actually are. And again, when we talk about the police officers, you can see here, even the hat worn by the police officers over in Europe have the Freemasonic checkerboard right on it. The checkerboard, of course, duality in Freemasonry, as above, so below, the black and white floors inside of every Masonic lodge. You could see it in all of their teachings and writings and literature and imagery that's drawn in their books. And as far as the police in America, well, we have the Fraternal Order of Police, of course, who are fully supported by Donald Trump. And they couldn't be more obvious, right? People say, oh, for Fraternal Order of Police, it must just be some kind of brotherhood within the police organization. Well, this is their logo. You can see the all-seeing eye right on it. Of course, it's a 5-star pentagram. And you can see the Freemasonic handshake right at the bottom as well, with the checkerboard in the middle. It's an absolute joke. So let's read for a second here what they're claiming in regards to this Freemasonic murder trial. 22 people have gone on trial in France on charges of murder. And of course, again, you know that not all 22 people are going to be found guilty. Somebody might be found guilty, but I doubt it's going to be one of the Freemasons. It'll probably end up being the doctor or one of the executives. And we certainly know it won't be the intel agents, and it certainly won't be the police. But it'll likely be the corporate goons. And of course, they probably won't end up in jail anyway, because they're likely Freemasons as well. And the judge, again, is 100% going to be a Freemason, because that's how the court system works. And this even goes back to the teachings, again, of the Synagogue of Satan, how they will control the courts. They will control, this is in the Talmud, the controlling of the court systems, how no goyim will ever win. That's us against these specific people. And again, you might say, well, Freemasons aren't members of the Synagogue of Satan. Well, they teach and study the Kabbalah. Okay, these are all members of the same club. Okay, these are all people who worship Lucifer. So again, 22 people have gone on trial in France on charges of murder and other serious crimes centered on a Masonic lodge accused of running hit squads. 13 defendants, including former intel agents, soldiers, and businessmen, face possible life sentences. Prosecutors allege the group carried out murder, attempted murder, aggravated assault, and criminal conspiracy on behalf of a mafia network inside the lodge in Paris. The alleged ringleaders are all members of the Freemasonic Lodge, accused of carrying out or organizing the violence through a network of hired attackers. All 4 face life imprisonment if convicted. The case was triggered by a failed contract killing in July 2020 when 2 members of France's parachute regiment were arrested in possession of weapons near the home of a businessman. They told investigators they believe they had been asked to murder the man on behalf of the French state, targeting on the grounds that she worked for the Israeli spy agency, the Mossad. Investigator, of course, make the Mossad and the Synagogue of Satan victims once again. Investigators discovered a link, business coach rival of the supposed person who was going to be attacked, and of course a link to the lodge's venerable master. Investigators say that they asked a fellow Freemason to arrange to have his rival eliminated for a fee of 70,000 euros or 80,600 US dollars. The alleged leader of the hit squad admitted in police custody that he and his associates carried out most of the mafia's assaults, robberies, and killings, including the murder of a racing driver. Over time, the crimes ordered by the Freemason Mafia escalated from petty revenge attacks to homicide. So what people should be thinking here when we're correlating Freemason with the Mafia is it is one in the same, okay? But the difference is that the Mafia doesn't come out with signs. You don't go down the street to your grocery store and then see a Mafia lodge. You might see, if you're up in, North Jersey or somewhere like that, you might see some guys that look like Tony Soprano hanging out in front of a deli shop or something like that. And you might think in your head the stereotype that they're probably involved in the mob or waste management or something along those lines. But they don't announce that they're in the mob, right? Well, I mean, Freemasons, literally, who are just like a mafia, are in every town in America. Every town around the earth has a Freemasonic lodge. In fact, they tell you on highways, if you pay attention, there's signs that tell you here's the closest lodge, so that lodge members from other cities or states who might be driving through, truckers, etc., know where the Freemasonic lodge is, so they could go and stop and probably have a meal and fellowship with their fellow Satanists, right? So the difference between the two is that the mob tries to remain hidden, even though it's clear who they are. We've all seen these real mobsters over the years, and you could tell, who they actually are by looking at them, right? We know of the John Gottis of the world, the Sammy the Bull Gravanos of the world, right? But they don't come out and never came out and were saying, hey, we're mob members. They would pretend like they weren't in the mob. But Freemasons are established in all of our towns, and nobody questions why they're there, because they pretend that they're just a fraternal order of guys who never grew up from college, who were doing keg stands and said, well, I don't want this to ever end, so I'm going to join this thing called Freemasons, where adults could just go and watch baseball games and do keg stands. Yeah, right. But then you get access to their books, and you realize that they worship Lucifer, and all their books talk about taking over the world, pretty much conspiracies on how to control and network and take over your school, from things like your school board all the way up to the top of the pyramid, and including, politicians taking over our government, having control of both the left and the right, and then playing the people against one another, divide and conquer. 101, of course, the motto of Freemasons is, in fact, order out of chaos. Now, this would be the first time, of course, as I've mentioned over the years, that we would hear about Freemasons involved in mysterious murders, right? Because that's what they do. They carry these things out. I've talked about Mozart openly. Mozart was admitted to be a Freemason. He was a prominent Freemason, right? Everybody's heard the name Mozart, right? But people don't know is that Mozart's music was Masonic music, used in Masonic rituals, and we still hear it to this day in movies over and over. You might say, I don't know anything Mozart has ever done. Well, if you hear it, if I played the music for you, you would say, oh, that's Mozart. That's Mozart. That's in a lot of movies. In movies, pretty much almost every movie, they'll put some type of Mozart song in there. And again, his music was composed for rituals inside of the Masonic lodge. They were Masonic compositions. And he had a mysterious death, as I've mentioned before. They still to this day, a mysterious death surrounding Mozart. This is just even the basic AI, right? Wolfgang Mozart died 1971, age of 35, pretty young, of severe miliary fever, a description of symptoms rather than a specific disease, right? And there's tons of art of Mozart and the Freemasons and a mysterious death, 4 mysteries of the death of Mozart, and it's well known that Mozart was revealing the secrets inside of the lodge, which they're sworn to secrecy. And again, this is what I always talk about with celebrities. People out there go, oh, they're trying to break free. Britney Spears, Kanye West, they're breaking free. They'd be dead. They would be killed instantly. There wouldn't be a chance for them to reveal any secrets. And again, you don't hear them ever mentioning Freemasonic secrets or Freemasonry in general. If you break the codes, you break the oath, and you start gapping at the lip and telling people what really happens inside of these lodges and what they actually believe, you'll pay the price. And that's what started happening with Mozart. He drank heavily. He started revealing secrets to people. They told him to stop. He didn't. He didn't sober up. Guess what? Mozart was whacked. And that's why you see that famous picture. This is a very famous picture for anyone out there that doesn't know, of a dog following Mozart's casket. And the symbolism of the picture is that Mozart, who was this prominent musician that everybody knew, had nobody attend his actual funeral. Look, nobody's following the casket, just a poor old dog, Mozart's only friend, right? Even though if you look up Mozart, Mozart was close friends and colleagues were all Freemasons. He was very popular in the fraternity, right? But none of them attended his funeral. In fact, he had an unmarked grave that he was thrown into. And of course, again, nobody attended, right? That sounds, that doesn't sound shady at all. And again, if you know about Freemasons and funerals, they always attend funerals of fellow brothers. In fact, you might have been at a funeral and not even realized it, if a grandfather, a cousin, an uncle, and seen these people there, not even, thought twice about it. But they actually show up at the funerals of people who are Freemasons. It's part of what they have to do. And it's not just because of ritual elements. What they do is they gather all of the teaching documents, the books, morals and dogma, etc., that the Freemasons are given to read and learn through. They go there to the funeral. They act like, oh, we're here in support of the family. And of course, the grieving family has no clue They give him a hug. They say, oh, thank you so much for coming. It's so kind of you to come. And then they, kiss their bun. They say, oh, we're going to pray over him. And of course, they're praying to their god, Lucifer. And then they say, hey, would it be okay if we take some of his things back to the lodge so we can honor him at the lodge? And of course, the unknowing, clueless spouse or relative of the Mason will say yes, because they have no idea what it even is. It's not something of value. It's not like it's a 24-karat gold brick. They say, well, just a couple of books that we gave him and things like that. They go there to collect the evidence. Now, again, pre-internet, it was very important for them to do this, because if some random family member was going through dad's stuff and found morals and dogma and these books that taught about Lucifer being the god of this world and the stuff that Albert Pike teaches, they would go, whoa, what in the world was dad reading? Was dad a devil worshiper? His book's talking about Lucifer being God, and that's who they worship. And it's talking about all this other stuff, that I never thought was possible. How was our dad involved in this, right? Well, they make sure that doesn't happen, because they can't have you of the book and then show the book to your friends and share the book with your community and then all of a sudden excommunicate these people. So they go there literally to all these funerals so that they can gather the evidence, and they pretend that they're there to pay honor to their fallen brothers. And again, it's more than just Mozart. Okay, you probably have heard about Jack the Ripper, and I'm telling you this in regards to this murder trial, because they're responsible for many murders, many abductions, and missing children that you never hear about. And Jack the Ripper's a perfect example. Jack the Ripper, you may have heard of Jack the Ripper. Everybody's heard of Jack the Ripper. What most people don't know is that Jack the Ripper was never identified and never caught. Yet they make movies about Jack the Ripper and all these murders that happen, all these prostitutes and women that were killed. But the reality is that they created Jack the Ripper, just like the news creates these stories and gets them ingrained in your mind and gives you a false vision of reality. Jack the Ripper is just a figment of your imagination that was created, that the media that they control wrote about, because all these women were getting killed, and then they made everybody scared. Oh my gosh, there's a murder on those, but we can't identify him. We've never actually seen him. Right? There's a book, Jack the Ripper, The Final Solution, which has some interesting insights into their connection to Freemasonry, of course. Now, they go into detail in that book about Freemasonry and the connection, of course, to the British royal family, which they are fully connected in a cover-up, trying to cover up affairs, marital affairs, and things like that. But the evidence really, when it comes to the Jack the Ripper murders, are the Masonic rituals, the graffiti, the symbolism that they left behind, okay? The mutilations, throat cutting, abdominal slashing, organ removal, specific placements in intestines over a shoulder or items arranged in patterns are said to echo symbolic Masonic penalties, particularly the story of the 3 Jews, right? I like that word. Apprentice Masons who murdered Hiram Abiff, the legendary architect of Solomon's Temple in Masonic lore. The punishments in that myth allegedly parallel the victims' injuries. Throats cut, bodies opened, vitals removed. Of course, the street graffiti. After one murder, a message was found: the Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing. Huh? How does that sound? I mean, Jews, J-U-W-E-S, ladies and gentlemen, just for the algorithm out there listening. J-U-W-E-S. I'm sure it's nothing to do with the synagogue of Satan. Okay, so proponents claim Jews, J-U-W-E-S, refers to the 3 ruffians from Masonic ritual, not a misspelling of J-E-W-S, Jews, and that Warren, a Mason with interest in Masonic archaeology, ordered it erased to hide the clue, destroying evidence in the process. Masonic symbols and locations, items like one of the women's apron were placed under the graffiti, cuts resembling a Mason's square and compass, the name Mitri Square being Masonic tools, and even a torso found near New Scotland headquarters are interpreted as taunts or ritual elements. And of course, cover up by Masonic insiders. Many senior police, doctors, coroners, and officials in the investigation were Freemasons, common in the Victorian elite. I mean, it's ridiculous. People just think they're like, you're crazy. They can't all be in on it. This person can't. A doctor can't. A coroner can't. A doctor can't be performing these rituals for the Masons, because, when you hear a lot of confessions of, which aren't many, of people who are involved in the occult, they talk about 3 o'clock in the morning, how they would do abortion rituals, right? They'd bring these women in who were pregnant. They would have a doctor abort the baby in front of them, sacrifice the child in the room, and perform cannibalistic rituals, right? And people are just like, a doctor is in on it? A coroner is in on it? Well, of course. And I mean, it shouldn't be hard to believe that the police are in on it. If you pay attention to everything going on in America, right? I've talked about this a million times, like the goal of race right? Race is a big thing that they want for division in America, and it's working because we see how they're creating racists, they're creating racial tension and racial division with the George Floyd and all the stuff and the propaganda, right? And all those stories that would come out. Police officers just pulling over black people. You don't think that, if you were a cop and you're just like, whatever, I'm a cop, I got a family, I got bills to pay, and you pulled over a black person, you'd probably be extra careful after all those stories were out there about cops beating black people and George Floyd, et cetera. And then we just heard story after story, right? Cops were just pulling over black people, pulling out their guns. I mean, it's a joke. Right? Because they're all Masons. They're all part of the fraternal order. And they're told, hey, do this, do that. You'll be rewarded. Don't worry about it. You're not going to really go to jail. Just like the George Floyd thing. You think the police officer, well, we all know that the whole thing is fake. But, I mean, you think the police officer, the supposed police officer involved, who put his knee down and posed for a picture with his knee on George Floyd's neck, you think he's in prison somewhere? Give me an utter break. Okay, these people are not put in prison. They're shipped off. They get new identities. They get plastic surgery. They can wear masks. They do not go to prison. It's all for the psychological operation that is America. So the cover-up, again, the police, the doctors, the coroners, the officials, the investigation were Freemasons. This supposedly explains why the killer evaded capture and why certain evidence was mishandled, right? Yeah, of course. This mysterious killer that was made up by the newspaper evaded capture because, of course, they were never going to say, hey, there's a secret society over there. I'm going to go, what's a secret society? Well, it's a group of people. It's like a mob. They commit murders. They're all connected in a network to one another. They're all conspiring, right? That's the big word because that's really the definition, right? They're conspiring to, overthrow this, overthrow that, infiltrate this, infiltrate that. They infiltrate the church, they infiltrate government, and so on and so forth. So for those of you that didn't know, that's the real story of Jack the Ripper. And of course, Mozart, which I've covered many times. The video with more depth on Mozart's death is available on the website at callforAnuprising.com. And again, if any of you haven't joined, I highly recommend you do. It's archived with thousands of my videos going back to 2016. There's not many people over on the website, but it is a way you can support my work, and that helps me make more videos and produce more content because, of course, it takes time to make content, and that help always is appreciated, as well as Patreon, etc. So we have this Freemason Mafia Network trial. I'm sure it is going to be a charade. We'll see how it plays out. I'm sure the Freemasons will be dismissed. And if the Freemasons aren't and they tell you that they go to jail, well, there's one of two things happening. They either broke some type of code within the fraternal order, and this is a punishment for them, which could very well be true. They could tell the judge, hey, we're going to punish these Freemasons. But the fact that they're even mentioning that they're Freemasons and that the headlines are talking about Freemason Mafia Network, it shows us that there's probably something tied into it here that they're going to reveal, that maybe along the way, it was discrimination against these Freemasons. They were chosen because they heard conspiracy theories about Masons committing murders and sacrifice and all this other stuff, and they're really innocent. Right, just like those other victims that you can't ask questions about. So pay attention to the trial. We'll see what ends up happening. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families, as always.